This is episode 724 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Connor Boyak. He is the president and founder of Libertas Institute. It is also known as Libertas Network because they are growing and evolving nationally. But we can talk about that and other work that Connor's been involved with in Utah, his home state, and where his think tank is based during this conversation. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Connor.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, not always do we get to be joined by one of my colleagues here among the state think tanks, but you run Libertas in Utah. And I mentioned Institute and Network, but why don't you just talk about your history and what made you get this organization started, some of the issues that you're passionate about?
Sure. So, Libertas Institute started in 2011 as a state-based think tank, not unlike what you guys are up to in New Mexico, focused in Utah at the time. Out of our organization grew a lot of projects beyond just your traditional think tank policy reform, including the Tuttle Twins books, which I write and have sold millions of copies, the Children's Entrepreneur Market, helping kids get their start. We just acquired one called Praxis, which helps young adults get jobs without needing a college degree, and we've got many more. That led us, as you were kind of alluding to, last fall to do a bit of a rebrand. So now our organization writ large is called Libertas Network, under which we have all these different projects and business units, including Libertas Institute, which is so our think tank is now kind of a sub entity of Libertas Network. Broadly speaking, the vision is we're trying to teach families how to be free and give them opportunities to increase their freedom. And so that's not only on the policy side and traditional education, it's also events, programs, and opportunities to directly get their kids, engaging with these ideas in a very practical way, setting their lives up for success. So that's kind of what we do at a broad scale is across the country helping families learn about the ideas of freedom, but then actually experience them in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I definitely am going to be focusing on your outreach to, just the next generation youth throughout this conversation. But before we get to that, ultimately, you started out as a state-based think tank, just like Rio Grande Foundation, except a few minor differences between Utah and New Mexico. I say that jokingly because in many ways, Utah is the paragon. It's a state that's full of hardworking people, the beehive state. It has very high scores in many social and cultural and economic characteristics. Uh, so why would you need to even have a free market think tank in Utah, which by New Mexico standards looks nothing short of paradise like?
Paul, I'm chuckling as you ask this question because it's bringing back some, I'll call them fond memories of when I was starting the organization and shopping the business plan around to different business leaders throughout the state, hoping to get some startup funding. And your question was their question because all across Utah, the governor for years had been publishing all these accolades that Utah gets. Oh, best for business, best for families, best for whatever. Pat myself on the back as the governor. Look how great we are. And that was the climate in which I started Libertas. So the perception in the kind of, especially the business entrepreneurial community was, we're at the top of the rankings. Why do we need an organization like yours? Here's my response to them and my response to you. Do you remember in like seventh grade math when you scored, let's say, a 72% on the test, but you got an A because you were being graded on a curve, right? So you actually got a C. You got a lot of questions wrong, but compared to all of the other students in the class, maybe you were better than them. So all those accolades that states like Utah get, sure, fine, they're great, but we're being graded only relatively compared to other states. It still doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. There's a lot of room for improvement, even in a state like Utah, which has the perception of being a deep red state, but it's really a very purple state. And there's a lot of things beyond those headlines where there's a lot of deep problems and there's government, invasiveness and heavy regulations. So, I mean, we've changed over 150 laws. There's been no shortage of opportunity to go in and reform things, even in a state like Utah, which perhaps suggests the need for vigilance, even when you think things are going fine, because I don't want to compare myself to other states. I want to compare myself to the ideals of liberty. And in that, Utah falls still far short, as does every other state as well.
Yeah, well, you can imagine how we feel here in New Mexico, but we are neighbors, even if we are culturally very different. We touch very minimally there at the Four Corners. And I'm told that the monument's not even actually in the correct spot if you go up there. I've never been myself. Have you ever been to the Four Corners Monument to stand in? You could stand in both of our states at the same
I
time,
was
Connor.
just there with my kids and my family like a few months ago, and I told them that exact thing because they're getting the photo with one limb in each state. I'm like, it's actually not correct, but makes for a fun photo if nothing else.
No doubt. Well, one of the issues that we do share in New Mexico and Utah is the heavy hands and the heavy involvement involving federal land ownership. And
Mm.
your Senator Mike Lee up there in Utah, I mean, it's an issue that kind of had been certainly forgotten about in many ways because during the Obama administration, there was a big push at the state level. There was litigation from Utah. New Mexico is, of course, like Utah, a very heavily federally owned state. It's an issue that kind of the libertarian side of the Republican Party is much more passionate about than maybe you get the hunters and the anglers who seem to be happy to have more of the federal lands. But uh, talk about federal lands as you see the issue specifically in Utah, and why is your state so engaged with that issue when it seems like a lot of these other Western states, including New Mexico, just kind of yawn and don't worry about it.
Well, the landscape as you're referring to, right, is that for most of these Western states, you've got like around two-thirds, in some cases up to three-quarters worth of the land within the state still being owned by the feds. There's a lot of history here that I'll spare your listeners, but long and short of it is that the feds long ago promised to cede and sell a lot more land, and they only started kind of holding it back when there were a lot of these advocates saying, "No, we want to, keep all this land for public use." But you look compared to a map on the eastern half of the United States, and there's hardly any federally owned land other than the isolated parks and things like that. So the western states have been deprived of the opportunity to develop that land, to sell that land to fill state coffers, to have productive use of it. That's not to say that Zion National Park or something are going to get handed over to private uses, which is what the scaremongering is always like. Oh, look, Mike Lee's bill, he's trying to privatize these parks. It's simply not true. But there's all this land that's just sitting there. Our family has a cabin, and next to it, we're surrounded by BLM land that's just not even touched. It's not being used. It could be farmed, it could be developed, it could be used. And you could develop houses, you could whatever. There's all kinds of opportunities. And so in a state like Utah, as we look around, all of our population, like 80% of it, is packed within this tiny little corridor all along the freeway in kind of north central Utah. So we're all huddled together, and you don't get kind of the opportunity to spread out and build and start up new cities. And so I frankly think Mike Lee's effort, for all the backlash that he got and all the pushback, his bill didn't go, his proposal, his amendment didn't go far enough. It was very modest, but the size of the freak out, you can see how coordinated the opposition is. The talking points they were using were very often inaccurate. And so Mike is a guy, Senator Lee, who he's a Federalist in his heart of hearts. So why does he do this compared to other politicians you're pointing out who are kind of snoozing and asleep at the wheel? Senator Lee is passionate about federalism, and he wants to shrink the federal government. And this is just one manifestation of that in what for him is a long-standing view of we need to empower people with more freedom. And in this particular case, that means letting them have access to this land rather than the feds just squatting on it.
Yeah, and I have to admit I'm kind of skeptical about the housing aspects of the proposal, but certainly, when you get into these political conversations, the opponents make it sound like you're going to just sell off Yellowstone National Park tomorrow, and instead, given the amount of land owned by the federal government, there's plenty of relatively unattractive, mostly resource intensive, right here in New Mexico. A lot of oil and gas is in what you would not consider to be particularly scenic land areas that could much better be managed by private interest or even the state interest, which there's debate as to whether you go selling off some of these lands or just allowing states to control them and manage them a little differently than the feds do.
Yep.
But all right, the reason I specifically wanted to have you on to talk is your organization, among the 50 plus state think tanks, is really a leader in trying to reach out to the Utes, as they call them. I guess you guys in Utah, they are the Utes, but I'm talking about the youth, not the Utes. And I'm talking about specifically the Tuttle Twins. You guys have quite a library there, so you've spent a lot of time writing these books, but there's quite a library full of Tuttle Twins materials, and my three daughters have read or been read to many of the, what you'd call the traditional paperback versions of the Tuttle Twins illustrated books, but you've got a lot of other books that you've worked on. So why don't you just kind of explain the genesis of the Tuttle Twins, what they are, and how people can find them, and what you're trying to do with that.
We're trying to teach kids how the world works, the ideas of human flourishing, ideas that sadly are often not taught in schools and by the media. If they're even referenced at all, quite opposite ideas are being taught in those through those outlets. So the Tuttle Twins books help children of all ages learn about freedom. We're teaching things like entrepreneurship, merit and hard work, free speech, property rights, personal responsibility, how markets work, the dangers of socialism, the evils of the Fed, and why inflation happens. So there's all kinds of lessons like that. This project was born of a father's desire to teach his kids these ideas. I had started Libertas Institute. I was just a couple years in. My kids were 5 and 3. My 5-year-old was almost 6 at the time. And I found myself wanting to, because I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd ask my kids, "Oh, what did you do?" And they'd like tell me that they played with this kid or watched this movie or whatever. But my almost 6-year-old occasionally started asking me, "Dad, where were you today? What did you do?" And I wanted to respond in a substantive way. I didn't want to be like, "Oh, I talked on the phone," or I typed on a computer. I wanted him to understand when Dad's gone, what's Dad doing? That, hey, that day I was at, City Hall fighting against eminent domain that they were trying to take this, farmer's land or whatever. So, like any dad in my position, perhaps I went on Amazon and I typed, children's books about freedom and free markets and property rights. There was nothing. This was 2013. Absolutely nothing. There was a little bit of stuff for kids about the Constitution, right? But nothing about these principles and ideas and values. So that was the spark that led to the Tuttle Twins. My buddy Elijah, he and I had kind of kicked around this idea about doing a book, and we did our first book. There was no grand vision for what it has become. It was just a fun little side project for two dads who love liberty and wanted to teach their kids. The book took off. We had people saying, "When's the next one coming out?" We're like, "Okay, I guess we're doing a next one." So that has turned into the Tuttle Twins series of over 30 books from toddlers to teens. We've sold 6 million plus copies. We have a cartoon series now with Angel Studios in its third season with over, I think, almost 300 million views now. So it's just going gangbusters. It's Javier Milei just put it on in Argentina. That was a fun little recent story that they have their version of like a PBS there in Argentina, a state-owned TV channel. He tried to shut it down. Congress in Argentina wouldn't vote for that. So he simply fired the people who were working there. He put in a bunch of libertarians. And the first call, or one of the first calls they made was to me saying, "How do we get Tuttle Twins onto our onto our network. So they're now, as of this month, July 2025, broadcasting the Tuttle Twins cartoon in Spanish all across Argentina. So that's what we're after. We're trying to teach these ideas to kids, frankly, their parents too, as you might imagine, Paul. I'm sure you can appreciate this. If you give, let's say, The Road to Serfdom by Hayek to the average adult on the street, the chances that they, number one, accept that book, and number two, actually go home and read it, I think are sub 1%, if we're being even generous.
Right.
But if I go to that same person, I'm like, hey, you have kids? Oh yeah, I got a, 11-year-old, 13-year-old, whatever. Great. Hey, do you think it's important for them to learn principles of, prosperity and how to thrive and succeed in their life? And, that parent, as any loving parent would do and say, would respond and say, well, yeah, I want that for my kids. Great. Here's a kid's book that will, so it changes the dynamic rather than the adult putting up their hands and oh, I'm too busy. I don't need that. I'm fine. Now it's a very warm, inviting embrace. Yes, please. Thank you for helping me teach my kids. I want them to succeed. And what happens is the parents, their defenses come down because we're not telling them, hey, you're stupid, read a book. We're instead saying, we want to make you a hero in the lives of your kids. So now they're grateful to me. They're not resistant to me. And because their barriers have come down and I'm providing a book for their kids, they themselves, the adults, are learning things as well. 52% of our audience, parents, when we survey them, say that they themselves are learning new things for the first time. 52%, which is great. It's also an indictment on the school system where, these adults never really learned a lot of these things. So what we're really after, Paul, is family education, both with the books, the cartoon. We're trying to create material where mom or dad with the kids can read or watch together, learn together, discuss these ideas, and then continue to discuss them throughout their lives. Hey, we're at the grocery store. Look at all these kinds of, cheese. Why do we have so many? Oh, hey, spontaneous order, just like you read about in a Tuttle Twins book. There's no cheese czar. There's no central coordination of, kinds of cheese and whatever. We just have this abundance because of the market. So we want to teach the ideas, but then we want to give families opportunities to see those ideas play out in their life and then give those teaching moments to their kids to reinforce the lessons.
Yeah, and if folks are interested, they can go to TuttleTwins.com. That's Tuttle, twins.com. And I'm there right now. So, talking about some of the books that you have, specifically the illustrated for younger kids books, and we can talk about, some of the books directed at more older, mature kids, but these are great for the kids as well as the adults, as you say. You mentioned The Road to Serfdom. Yeah, it's a pretty hefty read, but you can also get the gist from the Tuttle Twins version of Road to Serfdom. You have Bastiat's The Law, which is actually a pretty concise little tome in and of itself, but you have The Law with the Tuttle Twins, The Miraculous Pencil, and my last recollection is Leonard Reed's
That's right.
I Pencil is a pretty short book as well,
Yep.
but this one even shortens it down. Creature from Jekyll Island. I haven't read that one myself. I know that's the Federal Reserve. That's one of your books. That's definitely a abbreviated version. A lot of your books is what I'm getting at. Focus on these classic tracks that
That's right.
everybody should read, and of course Atlas Shrugged. Who could forget? But Atlas Shrugged being quite a I have read that one twice actually,
That's a
and
beefy one.
yeah, you won't forget when you read Atlas Shrugged. But what I think is really cool about those specific books, and not all of them are like this, but you really take these classic, libertarian or economics based books, and you boil them down to their essence and add the kids and their own misadventures or adventures, and it's a really neat way to tell the stories.
Well, and I'll add, Paul, that storytelling is how our brains are wired to learn. The worst thing that we can do for kids and frankly adults as well is just lecture them and, oh, here's what this means, read this textbook, memorize all this stuff about, free market economics or pick your topic. But when it's done through storytelling, when it's almost experiential and the kids reading the books are kind of going alongside the Tuttle Twins and they're going through the story, it makes the ideas penetrate in our mind much more. And so that's why for us the storytelling approach was so critical because you're right, these original books that ours are inspired by have Some of them are shorter, some of them are really long and dry, and like Human Action by Ludwig von Mises. Like that's tough for even like professional economists sometimes to get through. So for us, it's like let's extract from each of these books the core ideas, the essence of what they're really trying to teach, and then let's introduce that to kids through stories. Certainly, this applies to the cartoon as well. Just trying to create fun, interesting stories so that the kids not only are curious about the ideas, but then they retain those ideas even more.
Yeah, and as if to validate your efforts here, you were attacked, I don't know, been a year or two by CNN.
Oh, yeah.
So that you got that directly on your website, which is always it's a good indicator of the level of prominence that these books have achieved, but also some of the ire that they've drawn. And it's not just CNN. I don't know. I know you've had some other kind of national and other groups critique your books, but uh, that had to be a big boost for the Tuttle Twins.
It was, in fact, that weekend that that CNN article came out, we sent out an email to our community. We offered them half off all of our books with the coupon code CNN as a way to just play with it. We sold over 100,000 books in a single weekend, to which I told everyone after, if anyone has any contacts at MSNBC to send or the Southern Poverty Law Center or something, that it was great for marketing. So it was a lot of fun, but as fun and silly as that is, honestly, like the thing that I love the most these days, I go to a lot of like homeschool conferences, parenting conferences, and speak at them, and just having the kids come up after, they want to get their book autographed or whatever, but they're talking to me about, here's my favorite book, here's the I love this idea, where can I learn more about it? And it just 10 years later, 11 years later, after doing these Tuttle Twins books, I continue to be amazed at how little kids are so passionate about the ideas of freedom that they can understand them often more than most adults do. And it's a testament that for whatever reason we've struck a winning formula and it's working and we're going to keep doing it. But I just love that we can create this service and provide this value for families who want their kids to learn about and appreciate these ideas for their own lives.
Now, before we move on to the youth entrepreneurship events and other ways that your organization engages with young people, uh, you're not just focused on, and I would say the Tuttle Twins books are good for kids as young as maybe 4 or 5 and up to 12 or 13. But obviously, you mentioned adults enjoy them as well. But you have books targeting and, kind of attempting to reach uh, different age demographics. So I don't know if you want to go through those briefly or how, and you've got deals going on all the time. So why don't you just kind of describe some of the other offerings? Like
Sure.
you've got ones that go through various historical figures, and sometimes you highlight people that are not well known, or maybe critique somebody who's considered amazing and kind of shed a little light on that. So why don't you take those
Happy
on?
to. Yeah, so we have a range of books for toddlers. They're these cute little board books that are kind of tongue in cheek. We have the one, two, threes of the Bill of Rights, and so every page is talking about a different Bill of Right. And is a 2-year-old really going to understand some of the stuff? Maybe not, but it starts to get them exposed to the words and the concepts. The books that we were talking about earlier, you're right; those are for kind of age 5 to 11 or 12. That's kind of our bread and butter, what we started with. And then we have two series of books for teens. We have a fiction series, which we call Choose Your Consequence. It's a homage to the Choose Your Own Adventure books of the 80s and 90s that were really popular. And so in our books, the twins, you can choose make different decisions, and then you see those consequences play out. So they're making different political or economic or social decisions that have certain ramifications to them. So we've got a whole fiction series. I would say what's blowing up lately is our nonfiction series for teenagers. There's some interesting, provocative books in here. One of the favorites is The Tuttle Twins Guide to Logical Fallacies. And so every chapter is a different logical fallacy. This is a critical thinking book. And I put a little warning label, tongue in cheek, on it when we put it out. Parents, if you get this book, for your teenagers, beware. They will better be able to detect the logical fallacies in your own, conversations with them. So be cautious if you get this book for your teenager. The probably the star book in that series for teens is the Tuttle Twins Guide to True Conspiracies. As you might imagine, teenagers find this topic provocative and interesting. That book, every chapter, there's I think 20, is a true, fully documented, actual government conspiracy. Most of them, most people don't even know about and have never heard. So it's a kind of a fun resource to surface a lot of these insane stories of what the government has done in the past. We provide all the sources and show people, where it's all documented. So teenagers have been really glomming on to that one. And then so too with the last book in the installment that we just put out, I think in the past month or two, called The Tuttle Twins Guide to the World's Worst Ideas. And so every chapter there is, hey, let's talk about Marxism, or let's talk about eminent domain or immunity, and we kind of break down what is this idea. We give examples of it playing out, and then we give our take of why it's one of the worst ideas to exist. So that's what we're doing for teenagers, is just trying to deepen their critical thinking, expose them to powerful ideas. This is stuff you don't really find anywhere else. And I'll tell you, the conversations I have, the testimonials we get are just I don't know of another way to say it other than for these people, it's life changing. It's exposed them to a whole new worldview, one that they're deeply appreciative for. One of the recurring themes that we hear is people felt like they had blinders on or scales on their eyes that have fallen off, and now they've been kind of red pilled and they see the world for what it is, and they love that their older kids have that same new worldview and understanding. So that's what we're after, really just trying to help people wake up, understand these ideas more than the superficial schoolyard textbook level, but really deliver powerful ideas in ways that are relevant to people's lives.
Nice. All right. Well, I know you're also involved with youth entrepreneurship events, and I know we've had and are continuing to have them here in New Mexico, but uh, just that's an important thing, and lemonade stands and that kind of thing. And I know it sounds mundane, especially the lemonade stand aspect, but there's actually been legislation that you've worked with introducing across the nation in legislatures to protect kids who want to set up, basically lemonade stands across. It's prime lemonade stand season, actually, right now. But talk about some of those other events that you work to help facilitate across the country.
Yeah, the backstory you alluded to is fun. The story I love to share the most is 4-year-old Abigail in Colorado. I think it was in Denver. She had a little lemonade stand that her mom was helping her with. It was on the side of their back road where a bunch of runners were coming by for some 5K type event. And so they set up this little lemonade stand, 50-cent cups of lemonade. And some bureaucrat walked by, was inspecting the different vendors and so forth, and shut her down and told the mom she needs an $80 food handler's permit or food safety permit. And of course, you can do the math on how many 50-cent cups of lemonade she'd have to sell just to break even on the permission slip, let alone her cost of goods and potential profit. So that's the type of stuff that led us to pass the country's first, we call it a lemonade stand law. In truth, it applies to all youth entrepreneurship. Technically, if your teenager is babysitting for pay or walking the dogs or mowing lawns, any business activity requires a business license. Now, most cities aren't enforcing that. They don't know that your teenager is doing that. But technically, that is often the law. So our law applies not just to lemonade stands, it's all youth economic activity. It says that if you are under the age of 18 and you're just doing occasional little business type income, there's no permits you have to get, no licenses, no sales tax, no nothing. Just let kids be kids, lower the barrier to entry, let them have fun before the crushing weight of the state comes upon them when they're 18 years old. But for now, let's be inviting and warm and welcoming. So we got that law passed in Utah. As you pointed out, we've helped about a dozen states, I think, pass that law since. But after we passed our law in Utah, we launched a fun little project just to celebrate it and have some fun where we would create farmers market type events, but the kids run the whole show. So mom and dad can help set up the booth, but then they're required to sit back for 3 hours and let kids, count the money, dispense the product, answer the questions, do all the things. We did that in Utah for 5 or so years, got it really dialed in, and we're expanding throughout Utah. And then we thought, look, Tuttle Twins is national. Our policy work is now going national. Everything we're doing is going outside of Utah. Why are we keeping these markets here? So the answer was obvious. Let's do the same. So we added 6 states the next year just as a kind of pilot test of our early national expansion. It went swimmingly. As of this year, we'll be operational in every state. We'll help over 100,000 kids get their entrepreneurial start at our markets. The website is kidsmarkets.com, plural for both of them, kidsmarkets.com, where you can throw in your zip code and say, hey, what markets are coming up near me? We have a curriculum that we offer kids as well to kind of self-guide them through the process and figure out, what do I sell? How much do I charge? How do I design my booth? All that kind of stuff. So I think, Paul, like for me, entrepreneurship is the language of freedom. When someone has an ownership stake in their life, when they own a little business, when they own property, whatever, people naturally want to defend what they own. And so if we can get more people, rather than being consumers, to be producers, rather than being, tenants and renters and things, the more we get people to have an ownership stake in society, the more they'll want to voice their opinions and be part of the conversation to defend those rights. So I think for us, this project is about getting kids a sense of ownership, even if it's just the tiniest taste, this little small inconsequential thing. The average kid at our markets earns $153. If you're a 9-year old, that's just game changing, right? So we have 53% of kids come back for a second or more market. Naturally, they're like, Mom, I want to do that again. I can buy even more Pokemon cards or whatever they want to spend money on. So we want to get kids involved in entrepreneurship, not because we think every kid is going to become an entrepreneur when they're an adult, but that everyone can benefit from thinking entrepreneurially. That's problem solving, it's critical thinking, it's value creation for others. And so, whether you end up being a business owner, an employee, a stay-at-home mom, or whatever, this type of mentality, this thought process is something beneficial for our entire society. So that's the mission, that's the vision. We're not out here to, create a bunch of business owners per se, although there's plenty of them that are leaning in that direction and launching actual businesses. We're trying to spread the ideas of freedom in a context that is widely applicable to families. It's apolitical, that's not political at all. It's just very American, very inviting. And so we can build a lot of relationships with families across the country using entrepreneurship as the hook to create value for their family, help their kids learn and grow, build their self-confidence. Again, parents become very thankful to us, like the Tuttle Twins books, because, oh, you're helping my kids. This is great. What else do you have, right? And that allows us to continue to educate them more deeply about the ideas of freedom. So that's the goal. Let's go around the country, launch thousands of these market events, help hundreds of thousands of kids get their start with entrepreneurship. But then that's the beginning, we hope, of their journey, right? We hope, hey, here's this curriculum. Here's a Tuttle Twins book. Watch this cartoon. Come get involved. Hey, you live in New Mexico, right? Let me introduce you to Paul and his team. And that's the vision at scale, is we're using these markets as a recruiting engine to then get these families, their children involved in the ideas of freedom for years to come.
Yeah, and I went online and checked at kidsmarkets.com. There are 2 scheduled upcoming markets here in New Mexico. One in Albuquerque on July 26th at the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Posse, and the other is Rio Rancho, August 17th. So that will be at Haynes Park in Rio Rancho. So check those out and get some information at the website if you're interested in that kind of thing, or show up and buy some stuff
Oh
from some
yeah,
kids who are trying to make a buck out there, right?
totally. Yeah, we'd love more customers. The kids would.
Yeah, exactly. Well, being an entrepreneur is a great way to not just mold kids in a way that is responsible and takes interest in the future of their own lives, but it's something that I did, and I think it was influential in my road to being a free market think tank head. I was a golf caddy, which is a very entrepreneurial job. we were no taxes on tips long before Donald Trump showed up on the scene when I was 11 years old, starting out doing that, which was another thing. You could do it before you turned any relevant ages that you know they restrict you at. So I, as an aside, I'm open to changing child labor laws to allow kids to work at younger ages because I think it does teach them quite a bit at a young
Amen.
age. Maybe that's a future youth entrepreneurship project uh, for the Libertas Institute and
Let's
Network.
do it.
All right. Well, at this point, I've got everything I wanted to talk about, so I'm happy to open the floor to you. And uh, why don't you, if you have anything, Connor, you want to share about your work with the youth or any other aspects of, I guess one thing I would love to know about is, obviously you're even younger than I am. I'm on the younger side of the think tank leadership thing, but uh, it, where do you see kids going? Do you see, obviously, you're hopeful about the next generation, but do you see uh, kids responding favorably? Do you think it's just a matter of the parents helping to educate them and getting them moving in the right direction? What's your take on uh, America's youth at large?
Well, if we're talking in the aggregate, the numbers are dismal. The number of young folks, Gen X and Z and all the things, Gen Alpha, that are leaning into socialism is very high. They're very seduced by these talking points. Of course, as people get older and get more money, they start to trend more conservative because they want the government to keep their grubby hands off of our hard-earned money. But these messages are very seductive to the youth. Or think of another data point, the NAEP scores. These are the annual assessments that are done in the government school system to determine educational performance. And this was, I think, about a year ago when the eighth grade scores came out and found that only 13% of eighth graders were proficient in American history. 1 3, not 30. 13%. So I ask you, your audience, what becomes of a country when its citizens, its rising generation, its new waves of citizens coming into, voting power, completely are ignorant of the country's history, its founding ideals, its basic civic structures and processes? That to me suggests that there's a lot of cause for concern, and that tweaking at the margins is going to be insufficient to remedy the problem, right? If we're just, oh, let's change the curriculum a little bit here, or let's modify this. Like, I love Henry David Thoreau's quote, for every 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there's only one striking at the root. So to me, I wonder, like, what is the root? We can hack at the branches of the educational problems and tweak this here and reform that there, but what's the root? And to me, one of the roots, at least part of the root, is how parents engage in the process with their kids. If we're going to save our country, I don't think it's at the Capitol, even though organizations like yours and mine engage at our respective capitals. I don't think that's where we save our country. I don't think we save our country in the courtroom, even though groups like ours litigate and try and defend our rights through the judiciary, very important. But I don't think that's where we save our country. If our country is to be saved, I honestly think, Paul, it's at the family dinner table. It's rebuilding social fabric. It's having conversations about the day and what's going on. It's helping our kids foster critical thinking, being skeptical of what they're hearing, in the media and other sources, trying to navigate the world with intentionality and go out and be a producer and not just a consumer, be an active participant rather than a reactive, passive citizen. And so for me, the root issue is parents have long been shirking their responsibility. They've been delegating the education and intellectual development of their children during their most intellectually formative years to the government, to government schools, which of course government has an incentive to not have the rising generation learn all of the misdeeds and corruption and problems with the government, but instead to furnish them with a rosy veneer of platitudes and talking points. So to me, look, a lot of people will translate what I'm saying into homeschooling, right? And sure, that absolutely is an outgrowth of what I'm saying. but it can be still sending your children to any other format of schooling, including government schooling, if you are doing your part with intentionality to deprogram your children of all the garbage they're being exposed to in the environment you're putting them in, right? But also teaching them truth, teaching them good ideas, not just telling them what's wrong, but telling them what's right. And I find, Paul, in my decade of experience doing this, let's take your average like Christian conservative family, okay? Well, I'll use a mom as an example. That Christian conservative mom has no qualms with taking her children to, their little Sunday school class, getting the illustrated Bible for kids, doing some Bible reading in the home, going, right? She feels confident in not only talking about religious stuff with her children, but also putting her children into an environment in which those kids are going to learn their religious values. Why then do the vast majority of those Christian conservative, not that I'm picking on them, but just for our illustrative purposes, most of those people, though they do that for religious education, do not at all do that for economic education, political and civic education, right? They don't have that same level of intentionality. And for me, the answer, as we've surveyed this question and tried to figure out why are parents doing it for religious values but not for political and economic values, the answer very simply comes down to the fact that these parents feel ill-equipped to converse with their children or teach their children about these ideas because they themselves feel that they do not adequately understand them. I told you earlier, Paul, 52% of parents reading Tuttle Twins say that they're learning new things for the first time. So that's where we started to clue into the fact that, oh, I think what we're dealing with here is that you have a lot of these freedom-minded parents who value these concepts. They want their children to learn them, but they just feel ill-equipped to doing it. So for us, the answer is, hey, here's a Tuttle Twins book, here's a Tuttle Twins show. Just read or watch with your kids and you can talk together. You, the parent, don't need to have any prerequisites. You don't need to have any past knowledge. Just go on this journey together and talk about it as a family. We're trying to make it stupid easy for families to get into these. And we're not the only answer. We're just one contribution and one way of doing this. But my plea to parents is that there has to be a level of intentionality. If you just assume that the system or others are going to give your children the civic and social and economic education that you want them to have, you're going to be very disillusioned because inevitably what happens is you find that years later your kids have just been bombarded with all of this socialist propaganda and where did I go wrong? Why did my kids, turn into social justice warriors or whatever? And probably a large part of the reason is that you never talked to your kids about these things. You were never intentional in teaching your children the values that you believe in these political and economic contexts because you just felt, ill-equipped. So we're trying to make it easier for parents to be, to solve that problem, whether it's Tuttle Twins or something else. Again, the plea is we have to be intentional. We will lose every war we don't even know we're fighting. And most parents fail to realize that we are in a psychological battlefield that our children are every day. Their brains are ground zero. And if we don't give our kids the armor and the weaponry and the knowledge that they need to survive in that mind war, they're going to be a casualty. So intentionality is the name of the game. Parents have to wake up and realize they can't shirk their responsibility. They can't delegate this to others. Look at the carnage. Look at the evidence all around us of what that delegation has led to. Parents need to step up. They need to lean in, and they need to be the primary caregiver and educator of their children. No matter the schooling situation you're in, they need to step up and be a major part of them if we want our children to learn and be able to later defend true principles.
Oh, well, what a great conclusion there. That's basically where we're going to have to leave it. Although uh, your book, The World's Worst Ideas, I've read some of the more teenage-oriented books. We have some of those at home. If I had to make my nomination for the world's worst ideas, it would be government management and operation of the education system. That's at the top of my list. But Connor, thank you again for
Amen.
your time, and we're going to have to leave it there. So look forward to possibly seeing you here in New Mexico in a future date, but definitely seeing you at the State Policy Network conference with all the other think tank leadership later this summer. So with that, appreciate your time, and
Thank
thanks for
you, Paul.
listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.